Mr. Washington, why did you endorse the new Constitution?
Okay, cut.
No! Shh!
Sorry.
Okay, totally.
The political concerns of this country are suspended by a thread. If nothing had been agreed on by that body, anarchy would soon have ensued, the seeds being richly sown in every soil. Illiberty, jealousy, and local policy mix too much in all our councils for the good government of the Union. The Confederation appears to me to be little more than a shadow without the substance. Indeed, it is one of the most extraordinary things that we should confederate as a nation, and yet be afraid to give the rulers of that nation sufficient powers to order and direct the affairs of the same. From the high ground on which we stood, we are descending into the vale of confusion and darkness. But specifically,
Level O.
wasn't it because of your concern about Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts in 1786? We know that your friend Henry Knox wrote you claiming that it was a rebellion against reason, the principle of all government, and against the very name of liberty. Now it's your turn.
If government shrinks or is unable to enforce its laws, fresh maneuvers will be displaced by the insurgents, anarchy and confusion must prevail, and everything will be turned topsy-turvy in that state. General Knox says, as their creed is, that the property of the United States has been protected from the confiscation of Britain by the joint exertions of all, and therefore ought to be the common property of all. And he that attempts opposition to this creed is an enemy to equity and justice, and ought to be swept from the face of the earth. They may be instigated by British counsel, actuated by ambitious motives, or being influenced by dishonest principles. Know precisely what the insurgents aim at. If they have real grievances, redress them if possible. If they have not, employ the force of government against them at once. Let the reins of government then be braced and held with a steady hand, and every violation of the Constitution be reprehended.
I just feel like reprehented.
I wonder, Mr. Washington, did you and your supporters consider whether the suppression of dissent in Massachusetts and the overthrow of government under the Articles of Confederation violated the principles established in the Declaration of Independence?
Well, the legality of this Constitution I do not mean to discuss. That which takes the shortest course to obtain them will, in my opinion, under the present circumstances, be found best. Otherwise, like a house on fire, whilst the most regular mode of extinguishing it is contended for, the building is reduced to ashes.
Now I think I understand your reasoning, Mr. Washington. Ordinary people like the Massachusetts farmers have to obey the laws, but for the rich and powerful, you're saying that the ends justify the means.
Ooh. Without an alteration in our political creed, we are fast verging to anarchy and confusion. What stronger evidence can be given of the want of energy in our government than these disorders? 13 sovereignties pulling against each other, and all tugging at the federal head, will soon bring ruin on the whole. The better kind of people, being disgusted with these circumstances, will have their minds prepared for any revolution whatever. We are apt to run from one extreme to another. Would to God that wise measures may be taken in time to avert the consequences we have but too much reason to apprehend.
The better kind of people, are they your only concern, Mr. Washington? What about the ordinary people? Don't you trust the judgment of ordinary Americans?
Mankind, when left to themselves, are unfit for their own government. I am mortified beyond expression. when I view the clouds that have spread over the brightest morn that ever dawned upon any country. We have probably had too good an opinion of human nature in forming our confederation. Experience has taught us that men will not adopt and carry into execution measures the best calculated for their own good without the intervention of coercive power.
But who exercises the coercive power? It sounds to me like you would prefer monarch or oligarchy, ruled by the elite.
I am fully of opinion that those who lean to monarchical government have not consulted the public mind. I also am clear that even admitting the utility, nay, necessity of the form, yet that the period is not arrived for adopting the change without shaking the peace of this country to its foundation. If the system proves inefficient, conviction of the necessity of a change will be disseminated among all classes of the people. Then, and not till then, in my opinion, can it be attempted without involving all the evils of civil discord.
Mr. Washington, you argue that for your support, the Constitution is based on principles. I mean no disrespect, sir, but I have a serious problem with your testimony. Mr. Washington, please step down. For our next witness, I call Abigail Adams to the stand. As a woman, Miss Adams was not deemed qualified to hold an official position either in the colonial administration or the new government of our republic. However, while her husband John was overseas representing the new country as an ambassador to foreign governments, Miss Adams' extensive correspondence kept him abreast of events at home. I believe that this makes her an expert witness, highly qualified to explain the elite's version of events leading up to the writing of the Constitution. Mrs. Adams, please take the stand.
Oh.
Press enter. Miss Adams. Is it still going?
Yes.
Mrs. Adams, what do you see as the underlying cause of Shays' Rebellion, the farmers' revolt in western Massachusetts that so frightened Mr. Washington and Henry Knox? I'm particularly interested in a letter that you wrote me, in which you denounced the mad cry of the mob.
With regard to the tumults in my native state, it's tumults, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You said it.
No, I'm going to say tumult. Okay, sorry. With regard to the tumults in my native state, which you have inquired about, I wish I could say that the report had exaggerated them. It is true, sir, that they have been carried to so alarming a height as to stop the courts of justices in several counties. Ignorant, restless desperadoes, without conscience or principles, have led a deluded multitude to follow their standard, under pretense of grievances which have no existence but in their imaginations. Some of them are crying out for paper currency, some for an equal distribution of property. Some were for annihilating all debts, others complaining the Senate was a useless branch of government, that the Court of Common Pleas was unnecessary, and that the sitting of the General Court in Boston was a grievance. By this list you will see the materials which compose this rebellion, and the necessity there is of the wisest and most vigorous measures to quell and suppress it, instead of that laudable spirit which you approve, which makes people watchful over their liberties and alert in the defense of them. These mobbish insurgents are for sapping the foundation and destroying the whole fabric at once.
Whole fabric at once, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you?
The bottom.
Oh. Desperados, you say?
I say desperados. Oh my, I'm just
Ignorant,
elated.
restless desperados.
I'm just elated. Okay, sorry.
Mrs. Adams.
What?
This is serious business, ladies.
Aren't these the same brave men who fought against the British, who saved your wealth and way of life? What alternative did they have, Mrs. Adams? Isn't it true that the representation of the state senate was limited to large property holders, and that the western part of the state was intentionally underrepresented in the legislature to minimize the influence of poorer farmers and debtors? Mrs. Adams, weren't these Revolutionary War veterans losing their lands and facing debtors' prison? Can you honestly claim that they were calling for anarchy and the destruction of government, or were they simply demanding justice? Mr. Adams, Mr. John Adams, do you wish to defend your wife?
I'm jealous! Do you want to take the witness stand?
I'm sorry if I have offended our Puritan sense of property. Of course, Mr. Adams, as the second President of the United States, you have every right to testify. Thank you, Mrs. Adams. You're excused.
Yeah. I left a little early.
John Adams, please take the stand. Okay, turn this off.
Wait, how do we get in this movie?
Mr. Adams, what do you value more highly? Protection for the private property of the economic elite, or democratic principles of government? Well, for justice. And another question, Mr. Adams. Did you write that property is surely a right of mankind as really as liberty? Property is surely a right of mankind as really as liberty. Perhaps that first prejudice, habit, shame or fear, principle or religion, would restrain the poor from attacking the rich, and the idle from usurping on the industrious. But the time would not be long before courage and enterprise would come, and pretexts be invented by degrees to countenance the majority into dividing all the property among them. The moment the idea is admitted into society, the property is not as sacred as the laws of God. Anarchy and tyranny commence. You have some peculiar notions, Mr. Adams. You fear the idle will usurp the wealth of the industrious. Who is this idle of the banker of the Lord who lives off the sweat of our industrious yeoman farmer? You claim property and the secret law, but what about the liberty of those without property? Don't they have a natural right to create a government to serve their interests, or are God's blessings only reserved for the rich and powerful? I have no further questions, Mr. Adams. Please return to your seat. Okay, yeah. How dare you? Do you know who I am? Wait, I want to call on the last of the three men who was being investigated today. The Secretary of the Constitutional Convention, the fourth President of the United States, the author of Federalist Number 10. The man considered to be...
The propriety, Mr. Madison, the disease you fear is a democracy, ruled by the majority. I am forced to agree with Patrick Henry's evaluation of your Constitution. It squints of a return to aristocracy and monarchy. No further questions, Mr. Madison. Please return to your seat. Fellow citizens!
The most graceful walk-off.
I want to close this investigation by calling Benjamin Franklin as a witness. Mr. Franklin participated in both the Continental Congress that approved the Declaration of Independence and the Constitutional Convention. While he supports the adoption of the Constitution, Mr. Franklin has always been skeptical about the motives of its framers. Mr. Franklin, please take the stand.
I'm missing out on meeting some ladies over here.
Mr. Franklin, what is your advice to this court of inquiry?
Few men in public affairs act from a mere view of the good of their country. Whatever they may pretend, and though their activity may bring real good to their country, they do not act from a spirit of benevolence.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. Fellow citizens, the future of the nation now rests in your hands.
Okay.